All right, good morning. Welcome everyone to Accuracy in America. I am Don Irvine and joined once again by Brian McNicoll.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags. We realized we were called drags again this week by Biden.
Oh, okay.
Despicables and dog faced, Tony told me.
And for those that are now watching this on delay, because I cannot for the life of me figure out how to get it going back live again because of, I think, the Facebook algorithm change, whatever the change is, and all these other things. At some point in time, they may actually play nice with each other, but in the meantime, we'll do it this way, and you'll just have to enjoy it on a delayed basis. But nevertheless, we have there's plenty of news going on out there. Uh, since we last were on, maybe the biggest news is the President Trump, having tested positive for COVID, and going into Walter Reed on Friday afternoon, and then reemerging back at the Oval Office, back at the White House on Monday afternoon. That created quite a bit of flurry of stories and all kinds of stuff going on over here. I mean, from your perspective, Brian, I mean, how big a deal was it, that this happened? What's your outlook here and your take on all of this?
I think that there's downstream effects that we can't really see yet, because I believe that, as the campaign continues to unfold, Trump can now look at this and advocate for things in a completely different way, which I think he has picked up on. And, the impact of it we haven't seen yet. But for instance, he knows what the bottom of this is now, right? He knows, you can already hear him saying things like, we got to stop being afraid and go live our lives and so forth. There's a lot of energy in the country for getting back after it, right? We've been pinned up for a long time. People are not seeing the benefits of the school. The longer the school situation goes on, I think the worse it looks for the other side, because, people realize that kids are not getting sick. And it's like, I was up at TJ yesterday at the high school where I coach basketball. And we're not allowed in the school, where we do what we do outside, and there are no baskets outside. So it doesn't really have a lot to do with basketball, what we actually do. But I mean, that's what the rules are, and that's fine. And there's every other team up there. The track people are up there, the cross country people, field hockey, tennis, all those people, the kids, the people, who are involved in these activities, they realize they cannot wait until the school system gets around to reopening to start practicing, or they won't be competitive in their sports, right? If you want to have any success, you're going to have to come out of your hive early and start working on stuff. And, you're seeing that all over. It's like, basketball, which people thought would be one of the slowest to come back, actually late June, it kind of started popping back up. And now, there's basketball going on every weekend. It's independent. It's not sanctioned by the school systems and so forth, but it's going on every weekend, all over the country, not in Maryland, but in Virginia. There's several tournaments this weekend and so forth. Baseball is back, for kids, not the major leagues is what it is, but kids are back playing baseball. Kids are back getting ready for those other school sports. So, I think that when Trump says, if a 74-year-old fat guy can live through this and be done with it in 3 days and back to work, then we need to quit hiding in our caves and come on out and do what we do, So I think that's a resonant message out of it. The media is trying to, the height of irresponsibility, and he's infected this person and that person. And, no one knows how people got infected. The Secret Service is supposedly looking at the possibility that they were infected on purpose in Cleveland at the debate. And, my timeline is full of people who are convinced this is the case, because they had, it's all Republicans, and it's all key Republicans. It's the head of the campaign, Trump's top aide, Melania, Trump himself, right? It really shot a hole through their campaign. So in a week when they were pretty clearly separating themselves from Biden, now they had to basically step back and wait and see what happens. So I think there's some effects left to be realized about this. But I think it's behind him. I see you have Fauci said something about a relapse. The people who have relapsed never shook their fever. So they kind of knew it was coming. They had a low grade fever that never went away. Trump's fever went away really early. His case looks like my case in which, you had a day where you felt lethargic. Then you had a day where you felt legitimately sick as all get out. And then you had a day where you're like, wow, I'm recovering from feeling sick as all get out. And then you were ready to roll, right? Basically ready to roll. And I think that's what happened with Trump. I think by Sunday afternoon, he had enough of being bottled up, and he saw those people. First of all, people watch this show, all around the country, all over the world, right? But me and you realize it. I mean, it is hard to explain how unusual it is to see that kind of outpouring of support for a Republican politician in that part of Montgomery County, right? That's the bluest part of the bluest county in on the East Coast, basically, right? Outside of New York City, to have, hundreds of people gathered up on Rockville Pike there in front of the Walter Reed, that is incredible, right? That is otherworldly. Did you ever think you would see a day, right? So, I think a lot of people rallied around the president, and I think the fact that he recovered quickly, got back to the White House, sends a signal to adversaries and the markets and so forth that this is not a death blow.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say about this. I mean, what about this idea that the media has been portraying here too, that the ceremony to announce Amy Coney Barrett as a Supreme Court justice nominee was a super spreader event. That you're seeing that, you see all these photos of like here, all these people, and all of this kind of thing. But I think going back to your early point, it's like, do we really know, where this happened? I mean, that to trace it all the way back. Also, I mean, what's your feeling about, the president, the administration got a lot of criticism for what the media, once again, when I talk about the media, there's a lot to say there, about, not having a clear message, a lot of mixed messages from the medical side, his doctors, in terms of what was going on while he was at Walter Reed.
What the doctor's confusion? Well, one thing is these are not people who are used to dealing with the press. And so they were unclear on, what to say or how to say it, and so forth. They also got asked a bunch of questions that frankly aren't their business. So they were trying to kind of bob and weave in between that, and I don't really see where it matters, right? If he got better quickly, the news out of this is, he didn't die. There was speculation. There were all kinds of lies going around that Trump is, he only has 3 days to live, and I'm like, I don't think so, buddy. And these drugs addle his brain, and he's now an aggressive, steroided out, monster. And I mean, it just, the stuff that came out it really kind of illustrated the whole, leftist media problem, right? Because I mean, it was crazy. It was unsubstantiated. It was making something out of nothing with these questions for the doctors. And, the news was he was getting steadily better. It's like once I kind of saw the trajectory, I'm like, okay, this looks like it matches mine. And it pretty much did match mine. And, I'm like, he'll be back. I tweeted on Friday that he would be at the Resolute desk on Tuesday, and he was. He went in the Oval Office yesterday to work.
Yeah, I mean, there was no way. I think most of us who follow Trump and have seen what he's been doing for the past almost 4 years, is that the very idea that he would be bottled up at Walter Reed for an extended period of time, it was not going to happen. I mean,
right.
He was already furiously trying to tweet away. Then he got a lot of criticism for his his little drive-by, as they were calling it. When he got out and got in the car and then rode by and waved to the supporters out there in Montgomery County and things like that. A lot of criticism. Oh, the Secret Service agents they're mad because he exposed them to all of this kind of stuff and all
Couldn't
these
find
things.
a single Secret Service agent to say that on the record.
That's right. They're not saying there isn't anybody saying on the record. Yeah, I mean, there's it goes back to, I think, one of the things that you always complain about is kind of anonymous sources. People will say things, but they won't go on the record in terms of, they won't go in front of a camera and pose it. They will tell you, and so they will be quoted as so and so this or so and so that. But we don't know who these people really are. I mean, so it doesn't really have as much effect. I do, with your comment about the people that came out to support him. It was interesting because this involved a lot of people that I knew, locally, as well as people who came in from other ways. I don't know if you saw that Washington Post article that wrote about it, but the online, when you look at it, it was, the cultish, fervor of the Trump supporters, kind of thing like this. And the headline was different when you actually click the article. But as I, reading through the article, what the reporter was like, it was a generally maskless, kind of thing like this. But I know from the pictures that my friends had put out and from things like this is that it was mostly masked. There were not that many people who chose not to wear a mask. The majority of people did. The messages I was getting by email and whatnot were saying, were reminders that it's outdoor event, but in Montgomery County, you should be wearing a mask. So people largely complied with that throughout there. So, one of the big narratives of the media on how the Trump supporters flout, wearing a mask and all of this kind of thing. They were there outdoors wearing a mask, which is the least likely place you would find most people wanting to wear a mask, but they were dutifully doing that for most of the time. So, I think, the media's narrative, and you were talking about, the all the wild things going on. I think even maybe a day or so ago, I mean, even Joy Reid was talking about, he's still looking unhealthy, having trouble breathing and all
heavy
these
breathing, yeah.
No, and granted, I mean, look, I mean, one of the things that created this media narrative was the fact that, the president is a big guy, right? Yeah. He's like 6'3", 240-ish pounds or more. Yeah. I mean, I'm being conservative on that. He's a big guy, and we don't really have the same level of information on his health as we have had maybe with previous presidents. But I mean, he's a workhorse. The guy is a workhorse.
20 hours a day. What do you need to know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of the thing that gets me. But yeah, I mean,
one thing I want to say about that though, before you go away, one of the things he said was, this is the best he's felt in 20 years. Did you come across?
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Okay. And I think that the reason for that is, and this is one thing that does worry me a little bit about President Trump, is he had a full night's rest. They gave him the cocktail and they put him to sleep, and he really slept for 8 hours, right? And he doesn't do that. He sleeps 2 or 3 or 4 hours a night, if that. So, just shutting that body down one time made a huge difference.
It may be something he ought to be thinking about doing every once in a while.
Yeah.
Take a break and take it for yourself. I mean,
take a day and sleep a little, and limited public appearances, and
you can do it. But I mean, the other thing, as you were talking about all these wild stories, is just that it really got wild, on Friday and Saturday. I mean, so much discussion, of the 25th Amendment, of Pence has got to be ready, what's that going to happen? And that also the speculation that, what should, the worst case scenario, Pence gets sick, and then it falls to Nancy Pelosi. It's like, we're now talking about President Pelosi, acting President Pelosi. I mean, this is getting, to me, that was really getting to be insane.
Yeah. How can Pence leave town? It's like, what? He's going to die.
It was just,
that's the thing that, like, one of the things that's going to come out of this is the leftists don't know anything about coronavirus. They think they do. They spout their gospels and stuff, but they don't really understand like how it works, or the fact that 99.99% of the people walk right out of it and within a few days, and a ton of people are asymptomatic, never feel a thing. And it's they treat it like everyone who gets it is going to die, or it's going to come very close to dying, and everyone around them probably will also die, right? And so, and it's really kind of gotten exposed that that's not the truth, right? We've been operating under those presumptions for months now, and they are not true. And, you know, it's been hard to like get to the top side of that argument. And when you say, you know, like, you know, voting in person versus voting by mail, it's like, well, do you realize a pandemic's going on? It's like, no one is dying of that pandemic, right? Yesterday, yeah, the DMV had one person die, none in Maryland, one in Virginia, none in DC. Okay, that's, you know, that's 3 states. That's about 1/10 of the nation's population. None of them died. I mean, we have one person die in those 3 states. We're not 1/10, maybe about 8% of the population of the country. Okay, so if 8% of the population is producing one death, say you do that by 12.5, you got 13, 14 people in the country. You know, how much shutting down do we do over 13 or 14 people in the country?
Right, and I never want to downplay the number of deaths that we've had. You know, this is unfortunately an inevitable outcome of this virus, that we're going to get some. But you know, as you know, we have talked before on this program, is that these numbers are being blown out of proportion. They are not given any relevance in terms of
Right.
how many, you know, what's the size of the population, how many people have died that have been tested, and all these other factors. It's just a big number that people use, you know, the media uses kind of as part of their whole fear mongering thing. What about the vitriol too that was you know, out there, you know, when Trump got sick? I mean, we had people saying, you know, this is karma. You had Jake Tapper, you know, he was one of the few people in the media that I could recall that actually wished the president, you know, a full recovery. But at the same point in time, he also said it's your recklessness and, you know, and how you handle things that puts you in this spot to begin with. You know,
here's the thing. First of all, it's not an end of the world spot to be in. Second of all, one of the things that Trump really needs to do between now and November 3rd is say, 200,000, you know, according to, you know, died with, not of COVID, right? They may have had a motorcycle wreck after having contracted COVID, you know, but it'll still be listed as a COVID death, right? As we found out. And a lot of hospitals just put down COVID because you got a big extra pile of money if you had a COVID patient, right? And we'll never know, you know, we're not going to exhume all those bodies and check it out. So we'll never know. But when you say 200,000, and, you know, the early predictions were 2.2 to 2.5 million. Okay. Now, if you come along and there's been 4 million dead, then you look at Trump and say, man, you doubled the projections, right? But we have 10% of the projections. Like what, you know, the number that needs to be asked of Democrats, what would you have considered a success here? Obviously, we had a brand new disease. No one knew how to fight it. It was snuck into our country, for lack of a better word, by an adversary, and not told, and, you know, all the news about it obscured and hidden and so forth. Had to dig it all out, right? And you ended up with 10% of the projected casualties. What would have been considered a success? What would have been a number where the Democrats would say, okay, you know, Trump handled that well. We really can't go after him about that. Because just saying 200,000 died doesn't line you up, you know, with a lot of perspective, right? It's like, what should have been the case? How many should have died? Is that good or bad? You don't know, because it's not related to anything. And he really needs to point that out, because, you know, Biden just says 200,000 dead, you know, like, yeah, what a failure. And it's like, it's not a failure. 350 million people in the country, you know, many of them, you know, homeless, you know, in all kinds of ways exposed to this and so forth. And, you know, 200,000 dead, you did pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this thing could have really ravaged the country. I mean,
yeah,
you know, we saw what happened in the nursing homes. It could have been far worse. You mentioned the homeless. They are definitely a very vulnerable part of the population. You know, that could have decimated the homeless population. I mean, but we didn't see that, right? Overall, I mean, we have not seen that, you know, and we're getting closer and closer to areas where we're getting a better handle of this, and we're trying to figure out how to resolve this and deal with this. And, you know, the understanding has to be is that this is going to be here for a while. You know, we're going to have to live with this, and and just
the worst of it's over. I mean,
yeah,
it's like
the worst part is
back to
over.
work, you know?
The beginning part, when when something hits you smack in the face, you're already behind the eight ball. Now we've been trying, we've had some time to deal with it, and we've got all these pharmaceutical companies and whatnot. They're developing, they've been testing and developing all kinds of drugs. President Trump received all kinds of cocktails of various different things like that. So, we know that there's effectiveness on this, and we're getting closer to where they'll be able to push this out to the general population, where people, hopefully people will be able to breathe a sigh of relief, but not get completely relaxed, and let their guard totally down on this either at the same point in time. Right. But, even if you get a shot for this, just like the flu shot, it's not going to be a guarantee that you will not contract this virus going forward at all. And so, but what do you, I mean, with all of this, what's your opinion, in terms of how does this affect his campaign right now?
Well, the early prognosis is not good. That it is probably hurting a point or two, maybe three in the polls. But I think the long-term prognosis is better, because I believe that, there are basically two versions of how to proceed, after November 3rd on COVID. And one is, let's get back to work, let's protect the vulnerable, and let's, end the shutdown, basically the shutdown of the country, shutdown of the schools, shutdown of the institutions. The other side says, until we have a vaccine and everything is safe and no one will die ever again from this, we have to stay shut down, national mask mandate and so forth. And that's really, to some extent, that's what's on the ballot now. And Trump is now on the side of, we can go back to work, it's safe. If I can recover, you can too, and and stuff like that. And Biden is on, the caution and hide and stay in your basement and all that. And there's a certain amount of Americans who are that's gonna resonate with them. But I think most people, what makes us American is that we want to go out, we want challenges, and we want, to make our own way in the world. So I'd be highly surprised if it doesn't end up being a plus. I don't know about a big plus, but a plus for Trump.
Yeah, my concern, was, not only was the fact that he got it, and just that, we know how much influence the media has with the electorate to a degree. Particularly, they can help sway. They're looking for the undecideds. The base is the base on either side, and you get that. But it's that undecided group that they're trying to push to the Biden camp. But Trump is really most effective when he's out on the stump, when he's out with those campaign rallies. How does he effectively try to get another rally going after this? I mean, will there be, my question really has been, I've been trying to find out from other Republicans, does anything change if he gets back out there, if he decides to hold rallies again between now and November 3rd? Are there going to be different protocols in place at that point in time, or will it just be a lot like it was before?
I think that, he has to wait his 10 days. So probably after this coming debate. But, by next weekend, he should be out, and he's at that point, he's immune. They can quit testing everybody who comes into contact with him. He can't catch it again. And there's people that say you can, but they haven't produced a single case of anybody who caught it again. So, there's been a couple where they thought they did, and then they found out either they didn't have it the first time or they don't have it the second time. But it's not, there's no evidence that you can be reinfected with this. So I think he will be very aggressive about that as soon as the second debate is over. It'll put him well outside the quarantine period. And, he's not in anybody's face anyway. He's up there by himself on the stage talking. So, I don't think it'll stop people from going to the rallies. I think there's a lot of hunger, a lot of enthusiasm for the rallies. I think that, given the way the media is treating this campaign, it's the only way that Trump's support can get showcased, right? Because, they show Biden, every 5 people Biden talks to, there's a big, film of it on TV and so forth. But Trump, they're trying to hide the fact that people like Trump. The polls, all this stuff is going, to try to convince people that this is a foregone conclusion and Trump is going to lose badly. And, the voter registration numbers say that that's incorrect. The fact, there's a nationwide waiting list for guns? You know, do you think all those people waiting, you ordered guns and cannot get them, they're Biden voters? You know, I don't think so, right? Those are Trump voters. You know, if you're waiting in line to get a gun, you're a Trump voter. So, you know, I just
I don't
don't
know. I
think
mean,
it's there.
they could be Biden voters that are living in Chicago, Portland, Seattle. I realize their liberal mayors aren't doing squat for them, and they're like, we got to protect ourselves. I mean, it's just, we are living in a very bizarre world, you know, with a lot of these things that have gone on here. But you know, you just mentioned, you know, the debate, you know, so there seems to be a little bit of, you know, controversy right now too. I mean, Trump is planning on, you know, having that debate on October 15th, right? Joe Biden is willing to face him, but, you know, I think the Biden camp also can use the excuse that, you know, I don't really want to be there. Well, I mean, why should we have if he's still infectious, you know, should we have this? Yeah, should we have this debate? So, I mean, I think it depends upon the timeline you're looking at. I mean, if you're saying 10 days, you're fine. If you're saying 14 days, it's right on the cusp of that whole thing with all of that. But, you know, I mean, you know, does Biden benefit by, you know, is this giving Biden a potential out to say, you know, while he says publicly, I would love to debate, you know, continue to debate Donald Trump, if, you know, if they throw up this, you know, COVID-19 issue and they don't have the debate, is that a win for Biden? At least, you know, he doesn't have to face Trump again in person right now.
I think it cost him the election. I think he has no hope if he doesn't come out and debate. He can't make excuses. They can put up plexiglass or whatever, like they're going to do. I guess there's plexiglass for the one tonight between Pence and Harris. You know, there's ways of doing that, and he'll be out of his quarantine period. He'll actually be one of the safest people Biden could be around, because he won't be able to give him disease at all. So, you know, I think if he chickens out, if he does anything but walk out on that stage, then, you know, Trump will just say he chickened out of the debate, and it'll be hard for anybody to argue.
Well, you know, the other thing too, I mean, it's just it's all obviously, you know, conjecture and all of these kinds of things, but, you know, is there a segment of the population that looks and says, okay, you know, Donald Trump got it. I mean, looks like he's beaten it and everything like this, but with the White House and how things happen there, I mean, you've got Joe Biden, who's even older than Donald Trump. Is that a risk? You know, is this going to be is he in a higher risk now too? That we saw that Trump got it. You know, if Biden gets it, could he recover as quickly? You know, are we really voting for Harris more than Biden? You know, those types of things. I mean, yeah, the whole debate, I think, is really open as to where we're going with this.
Yeah, it's wild, and for to be this close to the election. And I think that the idea that, you know, we're really voting for Harris, you know, v. Trump, right, is starting to resonate. And I think that's what you'll see talked about tonight is, you know, the very real idea. I mean, they talk about the Harris Biden campaign. Who puts the vice president first, right? They both said that. And then they both kind of got some feedback on it and sort of backed off, whatnot. But I mean, that's the trial balloon they were floating, because that's how they intended to do this. They don't intend to Biden to serve even for the 4 years that he would be elected for. And, you know, they may even have made a deal with him already to get out when the time is right. You know, but that's you know, you'll see Pence say, you know, you're endangering yourself of being under one of the most radical people who's ever gotten this far in American politics in Kamala Harris. So
So I mean, for this debate that people do watch it. They don't pay as much attention usually to the VP debate as they do to the presidential debate. But given the whole thing that just happened with President Trump and COVID, do you think there are going to be more eyeballs on this? Are people going to be looking at Pence and Harris and assessing them on their presidential capabilities as well now, potential?
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest, you know, I'm trying to think of a bigger vice presidential debate than this one. And I don't know. I think this is the biggest one, at least for a long time.
Who would you predict would win this debate? I mean, you know,
I mean, I'm on a certain side, so I'm probably biased, right? But you know, Pence is really good at this, and he's really good at these kind of formats where there's a third or fourth person in the room talking, right? And she has had some problems with this. Her thing is that, you know, the aggressive questioning during the hearings, right? That's kind of her specialty. This doesn't really play to that. And, you know, when she gets trapped, she's not good at it. She's not good at getting out of it. She shrieks and she gets mad, and you can't get mad at it, you know. And, you know, that was the difference the other night. And, you know, and I still say the longer people absorb what happened at that first presidential debate, the more they're going to realize that Trump really pummeled Biden. And I think that similar thing could happen tonight, because she will be really mean and aggressive. And Pence, you know what Pence did before he got into politics, right? He was a radio talk show host,
right?
Political talk show host. So, I mean, he knows how to formulate this stuff into sound bites. He's been at it now as vice president for a long time. He he will not overstate. He will not understate. And he's been really good at looking consensus and sensible and, you know, digestible and so forth. And she is really not. You know, the time she's been on the stage, it's been looked at that, you know, if you're on her side, she's like fierce, you know, attacker of Brett Kavanaugh. But if you look at it, the punches she threw on Kavanaugh did not land, right? She asked him if he'd ever talked to some law firm, and he's like, no. It's like, you know, at that moment you pull out, well, here's a call log of you talking to that law firm. You're lying, right? She was speculating. You don't speculate in that situation. If you're a good lawyer, you never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to, right? And she just moved on because she didn't have it, right? She floated a trial balloon that she didn't have the facts. She tried something like that with Pence tonight. She'll get punished for it.
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to think of a time where Pence was in Congress or was the governor where he ever really got trapped or anything like this. I mean, I don't recall anything that he ever did where, you know, he ever really flubbed anything. I mean, he's very on message and pretty darn polished overall.
That's right.
And I'm hoping that, you know, that also will reassure some people too, that saying like, you know, maybe, you know, just like it did 4 years ago in a lot of ways, is that you may think that Trump can be a loose cannon at times, but he's got the steady Eddie, you know, and Vice President Pence there by his side, and that they're a good balance together. They work well together.
Right.
And so that you can judge them as a team, because that's what they are, as a team.
Right.
Right. So I did want to ask you about this too, though, because I know how much you love her. And that's that thing I threw up here on Jen Rubin throwing out the thing about maybe we need to defund Walter Reed. I know Dan Gaynor, who we both know from MRC, so it's like, well, at least she has, you know, thrown away all the pretense of being a conservative blogger.
Right. Well, I mean, she's done that a long time ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But you know, she was feverish, and I actually was suspended from Twitter yesterday. I had written the day before that it was like a crack whore like obsession. You know, she's like obsessed, and I mean, she is just sitting and reeling off things to object to, and to, you know, and to call people liars over his condition, and how can Walter Reed let him go, and how can they let him go drive around the block, and how can they, you know, and they're not a good medical facility, and these doctors are all jokes, and the AMA of Maryland should shut them down, and the Attorney General of Maryland should charge them. And I'm like, well, there's not an Attorney General of Maryland. There's a state's attorney. You would think that, you know, the Washington Post would have someone who could say, hey, Jen, it's a state's attorney in Maryland, right? I mean, somebody down there has to know that, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, on and on and on, just this feverish, like, you know, the hamster on the wheel, just, you know, all the hate that she could spew. And I think even the leftists had to look at her and go, ugh, you know, you're a little carried away, you know. So I don't know. I think she's in a bad. I kind of worry for her if you know, once Trump wins again, you know, she's going to have a problem, because, you know, that's basically her version of events being denounced, being rejected by Americans. So, you know, I don't know what'll happen then. I don't know how useful the Post will find her in a second Trump term, because, you know, she doesn't succeed in knocking him off now. You know, it ain't for lack of effort, that's for sure. But I mean, to find Walter Reed, like, you know, how many votes in Congress could you get for that, right? Especially on the grounds that she says. Well, defund them for this, right? That makes no sense. But
No, it's like these people who out there says like, why does Trump have so many doctors?
yeah. You don't get that many doctors. It's like, you're not the president.
Exactly.
And also, I don't know that didn't a little bit at least work to his disadvantage, because they kept wanting to try things, right? Because whenever you have a team of 7 people sitting around talking about it, that's 7 ideas on how to approach it, right? And it's like, okay, we tried his, so we'll try yours. Minimalist. I didn't take anything. I took 0 when I had COVID, no medicine whatsoever. And he's older than me. He may have needed it. I don't know what his situation was on. It looks like they got below 94 oxygen one time, and they get a little oxygen or whatever. That was a big national scandal, right? Like, I don't know why, but it was. So, I don't know that much valid happened there. I think it's one of those things that in a week from now we won't be talking about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you mentioned. I mean, you're saying that how useful would Rubin be if Trump wins re-election for the post. I mean, how much use would she be if Biden wins election?
Right.
Too.
Right.
I mean, I just don't see her being useful. Period.
Right.
No matter what happens at this point. I mean, that whole like you said. I mean, she's already long past the idea that she's been a conservative blogger. So where does she fit anymore in the post hierarchy with all of that? So it'll be interesting to.
She has to be a little bit of an embarrassment to some of the stuff that's happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things is how she manages to keep her job this long.
Kay Graham is, she's a lefty, right? Hardcore lefty, but I have to believe she's spinning in her grave that her newspaper is being used in this way.
Yeah, you mentioned Fauci a little bit earlier in terms of the relapse or things like this. But one of the other things I wanted to bring up about this too is that he also is saying that that 400,000 people could potentially die of COVID. I didn't look to see what the timeline was, but considering also you had talked about what is the level of success with all of this, how many deaths and things like this. I mean, if Biden wins, election, becomes the president, I'm kind of wondering, what is the measure they're going to take as Biden being successful? Is that we will continue having deaths? Will the media stop tracking the deaths? When Biden wins re-election, so because they don't want to, even though that he will have an quote maybe inherited. Say by the time it gets election, we're at 220 or 225 or whatever,
right. The other thing is, he keeps saying 1,000 people a day are dying of this. There's no way 1,000 people a day are dying of this. Trump needs to call him out for that. Like, who are these 1,000 people? Because you don't have 1,000 death certificates that list COVID as the cause. You do not, right? A lot of this is we're on pace for such and such, so we just sort of add that to the number. But they're not proving 1,000 people every day are dying of COVID. They are not doing that. It's probably less than 100 in the country.
Yeah, and I think that I get to watch a lot of CNN, about an hour's worth when I'm at the gym in the morning, and one of the things that I should probably stop what I'm doing and take notes or something from what I say, or maybe I should just come home and spend another hour or so watching CNN because of what they're doing. But my impression is of when I watch them every morning is that it's they're highlighting they're looking for people who lost relatives, family members to COVID, and they throw a lot of that up there. But I may be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure I'm close to being right. But it seems that I've seen like the same young woman who lost her father, who was a Trump guy, and that they keep bringing her back, over and over and over again to talk about her feelings about, my father trusted Donald Trump on the mask and all this stuff, and he died because of Donald Trump. And I swear I've seen this woman multiple times on CNN. It's like the only person they can find to say this is this person. To me,
it's all emotional. It's not data driven at all.
Right, right. That's right. They are going for the emotional tug on all of this and everything like this. All right. What about, well, a couple other things too. I did want to ask you about, so Joe Biden gave a speech at Gettysburg for which John Avalon from CNN says, that was a great speech. I'm a Lincoln nerd. That was a terrific speech. You know, the placard in the front was no longer Build Back Better or whatever. It was now, fighting for the soul of the nation or something along those lines. It's that all of a sudden, I don't know. I mean,
Well,
what was your take on
I
this?
think what happened is they think there's an opening in saying, Biden is decent and Trump is not decent. Just elect the decent guy. Well, the decent guy is for no bail. The decent guy is for riots in the streets. The decent guy is for kissing up to China again. The decent guy is for rejecting Israel and sending more pallets of cash to Iran. The decent guy is for quashing any speech that's against him, right? The decent guy is not decent, and he's Tara Reid and all this stuff, right? He's not decent, and that's the argument they're trying to make. And I think, Trump's got to go against it because it does resonate with people. But at the end of the day, at this point in 2016, about 7 or 8% of the population, or the voting population, had not decided. Now we're at about 3.5 or 4%. So it's a base election. So who will turn out their base is the winner here. And when you look at it and you say, okay, there's no college kids, right? Most colleges are canceled, right? The big college activism, burst of youth votes you're not going to get. There's the mail-in ballots that are coming contain almost no youth votes. The early totals on mail-in balloting is that it is not enough to overcome the Trump is supposed to have the people who plan to vote on election day, go to the polls and vote. Trump has a lead of 65 to 31. And if that holds up and the ballots, the mail-ins and whatnot cannot overcome that, he'll be your president for 4 more years. And I think that's, I think at the end of the day, that's what'll happen. And the college people, old people are not voting in big numbers, so it's the working age people. And I don't think that favors Biden.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I saw a figure that popped up on the television screen this morning that said that 4.8 million people have already voted. And that number will increase as more early voting takes place here as we get a little bit closer and the mail-in ballots. I know I requested one, but I realized when I was looking at my wife's, because she hadn't signed hers off yet, it's like, oh, I just kind of skipped a couple of sections, so they probably rejected my request. I didn't read it thoroughly, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, they wanted my license, my driver's license number, and some other things. I was like, yeah, I didn't put that down. I'll be there for early voting, it looks like, which is fine. As long as early voting is not like a 3-hour line, I'll be there. And
I'll be there November 3rd.
So it's a little bit unclear to me in Montgomery County exactly, how this is going to work out there. I think, they're going to try to do it like they've done in the past and with early voting and then election day as well. But it's hard to tell what kind of turnout they're going to get with COVID and what the procedures are going to be. How much spacing and how we're going. I didn't have a problem in the past. I usually pretty much just walked in, and done most of the voting in the past. I don't think that's going to be the case this time because they're going to limit the number of people in the building. But if they've made enough arrangements, maybe they can space them out enough and they can handle it all. I don't know. But I won't know that for a while yet. What about, so one of the things about about this too, about Trump catching Corona was the effect or the potential effect it could happen with the Supreme Court justice, hearings with Coney Barrett's. I mean, we had Mike Lee and Tom Tillis, test positive, and that seemed to give the Democrats some breathing room or some life to say, we can't have, we got to delay this till after the election and, because we can't do this. But the Judiciary Committee, the Democrats have been some of the first people to have said, we've had to have these remote meetings and things like that. And they've been doing a lot of remotes and hybrids and things like this. for the purpose of the Judiciary Committee, they can do this, and there's no constitutional clause. There's nothing that says they actually have to have the hearing to begin with. So I don't know, for the media, for the Democrats, they think they've got something here, but Lindsey Graham has been pretty firm. We're going to start on October 12th. What do you think? I mean, I think they're going to go ahead and begin. I think they're going to still get the confirmation done.
I think that Tillis and Lee will be close to the end of their quarantine.
Right. Exactly.
And they don't necessarily have to participate in the hearing. They can yield their time to other members or do it remotely, like you say. The Democrats are just throwing up roadblocks to try to delay it all they can and try to run out the clock, but there's no running out the clock on this. In fact, poll out today, the polling momentum is moving strongly in favor of confirming Judge Barrett to the high court, and even among Democrats. So I think people are looking at it and saying, okay, the process was fair, and Democrats would do the same if they were in the same situation, which were arguments Trump made in the debate that, it's one of those things, like I keep saying, everybody's like, oh, it's so horrible and interrupted and everything. But as people start thinking about what he said, it's going to resonate. And one of the things he pointed out was, when the president and the Senate are of the same party, the justices do get confirmed, right? The president's always nominated. I mean, Obama nominated someone. It's just a matter that it didn't get confirmed. That person didn't get confirmed, right? So, and the other thing is that he said, I believe was the real winner of the argument, is that Democrats would do this if they had the chance. So I think one of the things you're going to see going forward is, she's going to get more and more popular. And I think like these hit job stories like the Washington Post had on her this morning, if I'm the Democrats, I make this go away with as little noise as possible. Say, hey, we were beat on the numbers. Sorry, base voters, but there was nothing we could do. Those guys are so unfair, right? And not make a big deal out of fighting her, because she looks like a pretty sympathetic, typical American, woman raising her family, adding to her family out of love for people, practices her faith. Everybody at her work likes her. It's like a woman juggling all the balls and doing it successfully. And I think a lot of women are looking at that and saying, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I also think that, you've also seen some upward movement for Trump in the suburbs in recent days. So, some of that is that. Some of that has to do with Barrett. Some of it has to do with the housing and zoning and so forth that Trump is talking about.
Yeah, I mean, and Barrett, she was only up before the Senate, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
So she's a relatively known quantity. There's no big scandal or anything that they can get her on. So, they really don't have anything they can fight back with. And,
their argument is she's subservient to men. It's like, okay, you have an appellate court judge who, dean at Notre Dame Law School, and your argument is she's subservient, takes the back room to her husband. And like, I don't know, man. Yeah, it's like she's out there as much as she wants to be out there.
Right. And the Democrats' arguments on Obamacare or Roe v. Wade really don't carry a lot of weight at this point in time. I mean, she will look at the facts of the matter and decide that, we have the Supreme Court. They've just started a new term. So they're also deciding, what other cases they're going to take on for this term. It would be nice to have
an Obamacare case.
Yeah, they do have an Obamacare case. But, my feeling all the way along is that, once Obamacare was passed, maybe the individual mandate you can strip away, but, it's been in effect for so long, you're not going to strip away things like, pre-existing conditions, coverage to age 26, and a lot of other things. Those, to me, those are just as much as well, they're settled, they're kind of codified at this point. You can't take them away from people. So you can't repeal the entire thing. It's just not going to work, in my opinion, politically. So I don't see
the other side. I think there's so little of it left that if it left, it wouldn't really hurt a whole lot of people's lives. Okay, the only thing that's a big factor of Obamacare that remains on the books is that it expanded the pool for Medicaid. It added a bunch of customers to Medicaid. Changed the limits of the federal poverty line. your relation to the federal poverty line would, how far above you got to be that you can still be eligible for Medicaid. So I think the whole structure of the, the exchanges and the price fixing and all that stuff could come down, and 2 weeks from now, no one would notice.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's basically it too. Is that, I mean, you can basically strip away elements that effectively nullify Obamacare without having to say we nullify Obamacare. We have just basically taken away the key pieces.
Right.
Therefore,
mandate and no employee mandate.
Right.
The rest of it is, who cares?
Right. And so I don't care if it lives in that skeletal form at that point in time, because we've stripped away everything else. So, my point was really like not to say strike down Obamacare as Obamacare, but you take away the key pieces and you effectively eliminate it. That's really the way you do it. And that way, the justices, they can vote to say, yeah, we're gonna, we don't think this is valid anymore. But they haven't really said, we don't think Obamacare as a whole is invalid. We just think this piece is, and everybody says, but that's a key part of it. Well, so what? Okay, all right, that's it. It's gone. And I really would, I think a lot of the public in the end too would like to see the Supreme Court have their 9 back on there.
Right.
Rather than, we've already gone through an 8-person court, and it wasn't great. Right. So for that, all right, I've expended a lot of time here. 2 minutes.
So you have one on here that I want to look up. Mike Foster died, former, and 2 things. 2 guys with a lot of Louisiana roots, or actually Shreveport roots. Mike Foster died, and Eddie Van Halen died. And Mike Foster was a 2-term governor of Louisiana. He was born in Shreveport, but he was elected from Franklin, which is about as far from Shreveport as you can go and still be in Louisiana. He was an executive. He'd made a lot of money before he got into government. The big thing he'll be remembered for in Louisiana is the TOPS program. When I was growing up, Huey Long had made a rule that anybody who graduated from an accredited high school in Louisiana was got a shot at LSU. The entrance requirement was a high school diploma. I kid you not. So all these people who had no business going to a big school like that took their crack because it was allowed by state law. So what Foster said is, we're going to give a scholarship to anybody who makes all A's and B's in high school. And so, and help them go to LSU. So that kind of said, good students, we're welcoming you and we'll help you. Bad students, consider other options, right? If you were a weak student in high school, maybe you need to start with a JUCO, maybe you need to start with a, other types of professional development, right? Instead of just going to college and taking your shot at LSU, which led to, Vanderbilt is the best school academically in our league, obviously, but LSU is second now. And a lot of it has to do with Mike Foster's reforms. Eddie Van Halen also had a lot to do with Shreveport. He married Valerie Bertinelli, whose dad lived there. So they would go there when they were getting ready to start a tour, and they would practice because the Coliseum of Shreveport was at that time was not used all that much. So they could go in there and try and it was as bad of acoustics of any concert hall I have ever seen in my life. It is absolutely brutal. And if so, you can make your sound work in that place, you can make your sound work anywhere. And they would go and kind of perfect their shows. And we would be like the first show or first 2 shows of the tour. A lot of times like ZZ Top did that too, which, Shreveport was kind of a middle market, right? Did not get a lot of traveling shows. So bands like that always played there were big parts of like me growing up. Van Halen concerts were, we were talking last night, some of the funnest nights we had there. And he knew a lot of local people. He was known to like play his concert at the Coliseum and then go downtown to where the live music places were and just like, walk up and join a band for a little while and play a couple of songs with them. And, he had friends, say, hey, come play the last set with us. And, so he was well known. Valerie Bertinelli was well known around town. So 2 guys that, had that tie had passed on. A lot of deaths in the music, Charlie Daniels, Mac Davis. When I was in junior high school, I sang a Mac Davis song at the talent show. For all that I have, no talent. and Helen Reddy.
Yeah.
You actually had my birthday. I woman hear me roar, and you look back at that. I mean, she was 40, 50 years ahead of her time. Some of the stuff she was talking about.
Yeah. No, I mean, I put the Foster thing down there because I did want to get your take on him being a Louisiana, and the Van Halen thing obviously just occurred. But he's, I mean, Van Halen is basically a contemporary of ours. I mean, we're right in that age group, in essence. And so,
I'm happy to hear about
no, but he was a heavy smoker, and there was also something about that. He always had, what was it? He had a metal pick and he kept it in his mouth a lot and things like that. And so anyway, he'd been battling cancer for a while. But the other thing too was that this way I could confess my teenage crush on Valerie Bertinelli from One Day at a Time.
I'm right with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look, when she married Van Halen, I was crushing on, like, what? Kind of like that. Yeah. But anyway, Valerie Bertinelli, one of those teenage crushes I had as a kid. But yeah, no, and when I learned a little bit, watching some of the stories and news reports about Van Halen, about what a magnificent guitarist he was. He was supreme. I mean, he created his own. He built his own guitars. I mean, that I guess became a trademark. Yeah, and just unbelievable things that he did. And so now I have a great appreciation for Eddie Van Halen than I ever did before. And so, yeah, may he rest in peace. But as you said, music industry, a lot of people. We had a lot of deaths, in the baseball world with Bob Gibson, Ron Peronowski, some people more famous than others. I mean, Bob Gibson, unbelievable pitcher.
Yes.
But, we've seen, as they get into their 80s, we're seeing a lot of these people that we either watched or knew of and whatever.
Our childhood has taken a beating.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and we realize is that when we were kids, we were watching people that were, in their 20s and 30s, and so that with that age gap, that we would probably see them pass on in all likelihood, and that's happening. I guess I will say on Bob Gibson too. And the only reason I brought him up is just that a little bit of melancholy, because here we are in the playoffs and going towards a World Series, and he had that outstanding year, 1.12 ERA, winning the World Series, just type of thing like this. I mean, what a time.
Changed it now. They lowered the
they lowered. Yeah.
They changed the rules because of that guy.
Yeah.
The other thing is, when he got out of college, his first year, he played for the Harlem Globetrotters. He was good.
Right. Yeah. Unbelievable. And he's one of those guys. He is one of the rare baseball players, right, that played for one team.
Yeah.
Right. That was the old days where you would play for one team from almost the entire career. That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, that's
It's also like Larry Bird, and that he was a much better player than he was a coach. He tried to coach, and it's like, and kind of for the same reason, he was such a fierce competitor that he couldn't deal with people who were not.
Yeah. So anyway, all right, enough of all that reminiscing and everything like that. Everyone who has stuck with us to the bitter end here, thank you for joining us today. Always, please be safe and be well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. God bless America. And then we will see you again next week as I continue to figure out how to go back live.